everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Nintendo WireCast. I'm Hero TJ, and I'm here as always with my good buddy Amiibo Jason. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. It's November. It's been, I think, over a month since we've done a podcast, right?
It's been a long time. A lot has happened.
Yeah.
But I think perhaps most significantly in the world of Nintendo is the release of Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. So for the purposes of today's discussion, we're just going to forego any other thing that happened in Nintendo over the past month. Pretend that it doesn't exist. And we're going to zero in our focus on this new Hyrule Warriors game.
Yeah, this is the only topic that could get me, like, out of baby mode right now. I mean, I'm exhausted. I'm not sleeping great. Baby's going nuts. But I did invest a lot of time in this game, and I knew the minute I finished it and the credits started to roll, I needed to talk to you about what I saw.
Yeah, same. So we finished it about the same time.
Yeah.
I was a little ahead of you, but I think it was less than 12 hours after that you sent me a message that you beat it. And we'd been exchanging our thoughts intermittently since we played the demo. So I think we both... Why don't we start there with the demo?
Yeah, so we should really point out first, number one, we are going to be talking about the end of Age of Calamity. Not yet. We're going to let you know when that's going to happen. We're not going to give you any spoilers whatsoever. That's not in the demo. So anything in the demo is fair game, so we're going to discuss that spoiler-free. But when it comes to end game, we're going to kind of wait, I'm thinking 10-15 minutes before we get into that territory. So if you don't want to be spoiled whatsoever, when we get to that point, back out, because we do not want to ruin this game for you.
Yeah. Maybe we'll bleed a little bit into Chapter 2, but that still is pretty spoiler-free, and that is still within Nintendo's embargo parameters before the game's actual release. So we do want to talk a little bit about the Champions play, which doesn't happen until Chapter 2.
Yeah, for sure.
There's never been a game that I was more excited about than Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. If you've seen any of my content, you know that I love the original Hyrule Warriors. My favorite thing about Zelda is the combat, and Hyrule Warriors really took that and expanded on it, made it the sole purpose of the game. Then Breath of the Wild came out, and I will say, never has a demo disappointed me more than Breath of the Wild. I don't feel like what we played at E3 really sold the game. And depending on which direction you ran at that demo, you had a different experience. So I didn't get to fight anybody at all. So I was like, wow, after Hyrule Warriors, where it's such fast-paced action, I don't know if Breath of the Wild is going to cut it. Well, I've never been more happy to be wrong. I love Breath of the Wild, and I enjoy it more than any other Zelda game that I've ever played. So between those two, I have my top faves. So you blend those, the prospect of blending those into one game, and nothing got me more excited. And then Nintendo shadow dropped that demo, and I was like... Stop the presses. Stop everything. Stop everything. I'm going to play this game right now, and the rest of the world, I'm just going to forget all about it. And within maybe 2 minutes of playing it, I was so deflated. And I couldn't exactly put my finger on it. But the first thing that had me kind of gave me cause for pause was they introduced a time travel element right away.
And something we've talked about on previous podcasts that we were concerned was going to happen. And the last podcast we did was specifically our hopes for Age of Calamity. And specifically, we said we want a straightforward prequel. No time travel, no alternate realities, none of that. And we're not going to say if that's what happens yet. But I can understand your frustration when you saw that, because the second I saw the intro with that Guardian going through the portal, I'm like, oh God, here we go. Here we go. Yeah. This is some Kingdom Hearts stuff right here.
That's exactly what I thought. I was like, oh no, is this going to be okay? And then I'm like, you know what? I'll get past this because it is the combat that I'm focused on anyway. And I get into the first stage of the first chapter in Hyrule Field, right? And immediately I was like, oh no.
Okay.
I'm not one of those guys who really is especially concerned about graphics. Yeah. Graphics don't really bother me a whole lot. I played Hyrule Warriors, the original one on the Wii U, I don't know, a few hundred hours, and it was pretty solid. Then I played Hyrule Warriors Legends on the 3DS, which it was the new 3DS, to be fair, where it does run a little bit better. And I feel like in most ways, it actually did gameplay-wise improve upon the Wii U one, even though the graphics were far worse and the pop-in was far worse and they couldn't populate as many enemies on the screen. But the way that it ran, I felt was pretty smooth.
Yeah, it was.
Load times were atrocious, but the game was very playable. So I'm playing this first chapter of the and then I've also bought Definitive Edition for Switch, which is liquid smooth. Yeah. It's gorgeous. It's super crisp. And I had been playing a lot of it randomly leading up to the announcement of Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. So it was really fresh in my mind. And I get into this one and I'm like, wow, it looks bad. Yeah. But that's okay. I don't care that it looks bad. And then I start controlling it. And I'm like, oh, this plays bad. This isn't even 30 frames per second. There were times where I think I dropped down to like 12 frames per second, which that's where it really starts to fall off for me, is when the performance is so bad that it impacts my ability to play it. When it's constantly reminding me that it's a game and that it's chugging along and that the system that it's playing on is overwhelmed by the processing demands of the title, then I'm like, okay, I don't know if I am going to enjoy this experience. And then I played through the second chapter, and it was less of a factor, but still, I was really bugged at how they took a lot of the elements of Breath of the Wild, and they took a lot of the elements of Hyrule Warriors, and they kind of mashed them together. I couldn't tell how much of my dismay was a result of not liking what they did, and how much of it was me needing to adjust and adapt, because it was not intuitive for me. So I played through everything one time, everything I could, and then I walked away from it. I played each chapter one more time a week later to see if my impressions had changed at all, and I'll admit I came around a little bit on the controls. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but it's related, so if you'll indulge me for like half a second. Hyrule Warriors, the original one, and Breath of the Wild both have an option for you to configure the controls. They give you two options. In Breath of the Wild, it's called the jump button swap, where you can just switch which button is your stamina and which button is your jump. I switch it. So as my default, my button is swapped from what's the default. And then in Hyrule Warriors, you have Hyrule Warriors mode or Zelda mode. And I immediately switched mine to Zelda mode. In Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, you do not have the ability to change the controls or reconfigure them or remap them in any way that I have noticed. And I've searched through the menus trying to do this. And so the problem that I have is your button wheel is exactly rotated one dial clockwise for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity from Hyrule Warriors in Zelda mode. So I'm having to, in my brain, you cannot even imagine the number of times that I've attempted to boost forward in a sprint, and I inadvertently triggered my special. Yeah. Because in Hyrule Warriors, A gets you running super fast right away, and A is your dodge.
So for you, it's more muscle memory than anything else.
It's B.
Maybe for me, that's why the controls really never bugged me at all. I did play Hyrule Warriors, but it's been years since I've touched it.
And I will add that my one saving grace, and this was super random, and I don't know that I would have been able to play the game at all if it were not for this. Right leading up to its release, I played 60 hours of Hades.
Got it.
And Hades buttons are mapped exactly like Age of Calamity. Works. So I just even though it kind of puts me in the mindset and the muscle memory of Hyrule Warriors, Hades, I was like, okay, just play it like it's Hades. And that did help.
I mean, for me, the impressions of the performance were semi-similar. There were moments in the demo where the frame rate got to an unacceptable level, specifically when you were doing something like a special or a very large enemy was on the screen, which later in the game happens much more frequently. All of that I could get past to a certain degree. For me, it was almost entirely narrative why I was concerned about it. So again, if you've never seen the demo or seen the trailer about the demo, this game introduced a semi-time traveling aspect to it with this tiny guardian who was essentially living what was going on at the very, I guess, right when Zelda was going to lock away Link, it sounds like. So all hope is lost. Link's about to go to sleep for 100 years. The Guardian goes through this time portal and transports himself right before the events of what happened 100 years ago with Calamity Ganon. So it's this interesting concept where Nintendo teased this game as, here's what happened 100 years before Breath of the Wild. It was going to be a prequel. Obviously, if you've played Breath of the Wild, you know what happens at the end. You know, all four champions, they meet their end. Link is sealed away. Zelda seals herself and Calamity Ganon away to the best of her ability. And it's a very somber, sad ending, what you would imagine the ending of this game to be. And again, without going into spoilers yet, seeing that time travel aspect immediately gave me like Avengers Endgame type flashbacks. Like, oh, we're just going to go back in time and pretend none of that ever happened. And again, that concerned me to a certain degree. But the combat itself, I mean, I really started to enjoy it as I played more and more of the game. And I think, again, as you said, you start to learn the limitations of the game as you play it. And you learn to navigate around those limitations. And this game is no exception to that whatsoever. This game, if Nintendo does make a Switch Pro, this game should be the first one to get an update. Like, I want...
That's what I've been thinking the whole time. Like, I don't know exactly how many hours I put into it. If I had to guess, I'd probably say it's upwards of 100. But about the first 50, my internal dialogue with myself was, I really like this game. I'm enjoying this game. I wish the Switch was powerful enough to run it.
And it will.
I wish that I could.
I mean, it does. It does to a certain degree. It's not, in my opinion, at least, and I don't mean to cut you off. This game is playable. In fact, this was one of the more enjoyable games I've played all year. It's definitely playable. There's moments that you have to look past, though, of frustration, of limitation. Again, it's the limitations of the Switch, and this is a very ambitious game. It's a beautiful game, an absolutely gorgeous game. There's moments in this game that if I saw a screenshot, I could not tell what game it was from, Breath of the Wild or Warriors. Specifically towards the end of the game, there's one portion of the map that you navigate very early on in Breath of the Wild, and it was like 1-for-1 perfect.
So many areas I felt that way about, where I was like, is this 1-to-1? Even navigating Link through the space felt like the spatial relationship between Link and the objects were identical, or at least near enough where it was negligible.
I think that's where the problem comes in, though, where in Hyrule Warriors, everything was original for the most part. They took inspiration, but you never really found yourself in tight quarters like you do in this game, where there's moments in Age of Calamity where you are in very familiar locations with very limited space with a lot of very big enemies, and the camera is not your friend.
Yes, that's true. I remember the camera breaking the game a few times in Hyrule Warriors, the original, particularly when you were in those confined spaces and you were fighting the imprisoned. Because the imprisoned was so big and way bigger than anything that you face in Age of Calamity, even way bigger than the High Knocks. But what would happen was you just start clipping through everything. You'd actually be inside the imprisoned at points, and there is some of that to some degree. I remember you messaged me saying that the camera was like really making you crazy
until I figured it out.
It didn't It didn't bother me so much because most of the time when the camera does completely go haywire, it's during an animation and not when I'm actually trying to play. So like that does happen.
I play very oddly. So I treat this game like Dark Souls to a certain degree, where I am like rolling around. I am like dodging like crazy at any given moment. I tend to underpower my characters in these games. I go straight through the story, no side quests, no nothing. I'm crazy underpowered, so I'm dodging like crazy. But again, I got to a point later in the game where I was in a room, and I'm like, I am avoiding this part of the room. Because I know if I go over there, this guy's going to come over and block my camera, and I can't see anything. So again, I adopted my play style to the controls without even realizing I was doing it. But I also played this game completely 100% in handheld mode.
You did?
And this is going to sound like this is an ad. This is not an ad. I am using the Hori Split Pad Pro on my Switch, and I am never going back to Joy-Con. Ever. This device is the most comfortable handheld gaming experience I've had ever.
That's pretty awesome.
I tried playing this with the Joy-Con, and I couldn't do it. I mean, these are obviously much bulkier, right?
Yeah, which is good because you can hold them.
But this feels like a very long Pro controller.
Yeah, I did a similar thing. I do use the Joy-Cons, but I have this if you're listening to this, the audio version, Jason and I are displaying our switches in their handheld mode so that you can see that switches without some sort of outer shell or bulkier controller, for me, are unusable. I cannot play it in portable mode. It just cramps my hands within 5 or 6 minutes.
I'm sending you one of these.
I
need your address. Hori was nice enough. They sent me 4 of these, and I'm doing a full review on these very soon. I can't do it yet because I'm playing a game with them that I'm not allowed to say I'm playing yet. So I think the embargo breaks on that in like a week. Cool. I'll talk to you more about that, TJ, later. But then I can get the review out on these things. But this is the most comfortable experience I've had playing. The joysticks are full-sized and amazing. The only negative aspect is there's no motion controls. And
well, okay, since you brought that up, I don't know how negative of an aspect it is, because I don't know that I've ever played a game that has worse motion controls than
I almost jumped into a spoiler when you said that, because I've had a few moments in the game where I'm aiming at a specific enemy and I'm like, why won't you aim up?
Okay, now Link is the first character you get to operate. Every character has a unique skill that's mapped to the ZR button, and Link's is firing off a volley of arrows. You can control these arrows in the same way. It goes into bullet time, similar to how it does in Breath of the Wild, which is really awesome. And the slight adjustment to your aiming that you can make in Breath of the Wild with motion controls is phenomenal, and it's so intuitive. In this game, I want to recreate that experience, but I am fighting with the camera the entire time. And this extends to any time that the game asks you to use motion controls. It doesn't let me go up. Go up, controller, because a lot of the time I'm below whatever it is that I'm trying to shoot, or I just want to aim higher, because you also get the bonus for hitting somebody in their vulnerable spot. So
you get that very amazing sound effect, like ting. And that's such a satisfying sound. Yeah.
I know. So you want to hit the Hinox in the eyeball, which is not that hard to do if you
it's a big target.
Manual control. But you try to do it with moving the controller, and it is driving me nuts. I did experiment with turning it off completely and seeing if that enhanced the experience. I found that because there are different modes, we're entering into minor spoiler territory, so I'll keep this.
I think I know what you're about to say, but we'll
depending on the mode of play that you are in, you may or may not prefer motion control, and I found that I wound up being better off having it on, even though it was something that I was fighting.
If you're talking about the mode that I'm thinking of, or the part of the game that you're thinking of, I hated, because again, I was swapping back between Joy-Con and then these, and then halfway through the game, I'm like, I'm using nothing but this Split Pad Pro. I think honestly we're at a decent place right now to just say let's talk spoilers.
Okay.
There was one other thing though. Oh yeah, real quick, for any of you who are playing the game and are having a hard time with a specific enemy, I have discovered something that gives you invincibility frames, and I abused it the entire game. So if an enemy was charging you, or pretty much anything, all you have to do is whip out your bombs, and you cannot be hurt during the bomb throwing animation. Even if an enemy is like right on top of you, like hitting you, it registers no damage whatsoever. Like later on in the game, that's the only way I got past some bosses. Like I knew they were coming. I knew I was low on hearts, and I'm like, all right, throw bomb, iframes, give me those iframes. So
now, like related to that, I know that I started off with all the negative stuff, but after putting in the amount of time that I've put into the game, I really feel like the controls are the perfect marriage between button remapping aside. It's the perfect marriage between Breath of the Wild and Hyrule Warriors, where it made me feel like my impression now is that they took Breath of the Wild combat and they just amped it up so that it's fast-paced, high-speed, extremely dynamic Breath of the Wild combat, and all of the enemies that you face in Breath of the Wild behave the same way that they behave in Age of Calamity, to where if you wanted to approach them the same way that you did in Breath of the Wild, you could, and it would work, and it would be a viable strategy. But they also have like enhancements. They're faster too. So they do things that maybe they didn't do. Link has like way more options for combat than he did in Breath of the Wild. Not to mention you have a whole cadre of other characters that you can select. So there are many more ways to be able to face enemies. And that is where this game really, really shines. I think it is such an incredibly impressive labor of love, so thoughtful and considerate the way that they put these characters together and they assembled it and they built this world. This was not just some schlock job.
No, not at all.
There was a lot of devotion that went into designing the way that the characters interact with the enemies, and that did not disappoint. In fact, this is the most minorest. No, this isn't a spoiler. It was in the trailer. Fighting Lionel in Breath of the Wild was by far my favorite adventure. Even long after I beat the game, I'd go out and I would just do Hyrule Patrol. Oh, more Lionels on the map. Another Blood Moon. Time to clear all those out. I loved it. And fighting Lionel in Age of Calamity, I like so much more, because there are so many different ways to approach it, and the way that the Lionels engage you. You're not just fighting one Lionel at a time. Sometimes you're fighting like a small horde of Lionel, and
that last
there
Lionel,
are other.
I saw that and I'm like, oh my god, TJ's got to be loving this moment.
Just some next level gaming for me, and in that way, I would for that reason alone, how fun and satisfying it is to fight the familiar foes from Breath of the Wild makes this game very high tier for me.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I want to say before we go into spoilers is this, and I typically don't do this because I want you to listen to this, but if you were on the fence about getting this game, stop listening to this now. Pick it up, play it. It is a fantastically fun game. I had more fun with this game than almost any other game this year. This game exceeded my expectations. There are certain things that could be improved with a hardware revision of the Switch at some point, and I fully believe they will fix it.
Your lips to God's ears. I want that to happen.
But pick this game up and stop listening. If you've already beaten the game, or you have zero intention to play it, you can move forward, because we are officially going to move into spoilers. TJ, do you want to give your honest to God feedback about the game itself before we do spoilers?
Yeah, if like Jason and myself, you had reservations about the story because of the time travel elements that were introduced in the trailer and the demo, I would say don't let that be the impediment. It just accept it for what it is and move on, because I don't think it's going to prevent you from enjoying the game. I still think you're going to get what will amount to a very satisfying experience out of the game.
So, that being said, we are officially now in spoilers. Oddly enough, I did not expect so many characters to be in the game. Same. So, when we first saw this, I expected there to be the champion Zelda Impa, maybe King.
I was 100% convinced King was in, but then they bait and switched me in the game, and I started to be like, oh, maybe I was wrong about that.
So we know the King is in the game towards the end.
Yeah. I also was pretty convinced Hestu was in.
Yeah.
And that wound up materializing relatively early. He's actually, am I right that he's the first character you unlock other than the champion?
I think that is accurate. I know in Chapter 4, you can unlock the monk from the champion's Ballad. So
I didn't do that. Oh no,
did I spoil something?
No, I beat the whole game in Chapter 4.
Yeah, he's totally optional. So you have to do like 3 side quests, and then you unlock the chamber, and he does a lot of the same moves he did as the final boss in Champion's Ballad.
Really?
So
Wait, is it in Chapter 4 of the story mode or on the map somewhere?
It's not in the story mode. It's totally optional. It's on the map.
Okay.
There's a website called NintendoWire.com. We have a guide about how to get it.
I'm going to look that up because I was wondering about that because I hope I'm not going to spoil something for you now.
I already know everything.
Okay. I unlocked the fairy.
Yeah, I saw the fairy.
The Great Fairy last night, and that really surprised me. And I unlocked her by doing like 4 maps, not the story mode, but like little map elements where I had to fight her. And I found 2 of them for Monk Master Koshi that was similar in terms of the icon. So, Koshia. Yeah. So I was like, hey, I wonder if the same thing is happening with him. So I kept trying to unlock stuff, but I found 2 and 3. I haven't found number 1. Yeah. Challenge number 1. So I guess I'll read your guide and figure out how to get that.
So, real quick, I'm going to go down the list. Link, Impa, Zelda, Mipha, Daruk, Ravali, Urbosa, Hetsu, Sidon, Yunobo, Teba, Riju, Master Koga, King, Great Fairies, Monk, Mas, Koshia, Tarako. Is it Tarako?
Tarako.
So Tarako is the guardian,
little
robot guy.
Yeah,
and then guardian, Calamity Ganon. You get to play as Calamity Ganon.
Really? So I've got a few more I still need to get.
Calamity Ganon is you have to like beat everything, and then a versus Calamity Ganon thing shows up, and then you fight him again in a time trial, and then you get to play as him. But a lot of characters, more characters than I expected to be in this game.
I'm actually really surprised that you can't unlock Suga.
Yeah. Yeah,
because he's a character that seems so ripe for playing, but maybe they'll do something like they did with the first Hyrule Warriors, where Sia and Volga and Wizro came with a few extra missions afterwards, and they put that character in there because that character seems so obvious.
Yeah, I'd love to see DLC in this to a certain degree. It's going to be difficult though to the level they did it in the last game, because every character in this game is based in Breath of the Wild. That's the thing that kind of was the saving grace for me. Yes, and again, this is full-on spoiler. This game retcons the ending of Breath of the Wild in every way. And by retcon, I mean it's an alternate reality. It's an alternate timeline.
Yeah. It's splinters the timeline.
This isn't going to affect Breath of the Wild 2. It's not going to do any of that.
Although I've been speculating that it might.
Oh, that'd be tough.
Because even though the events that took place this was something I was thinking a lot about. I'm like, so basically, Tarako goes back in time and allows Zelda and Link and company to be able to prevent a lot of the events that happened, namely the corruption of the divine beasts and the death of the champions. That's really the turning point in the war. Once they do that, then they're set on a different course. But in the process of doing that, they did do something that could potentially affect Breath of the Wild 2. And that is that they recruited 4 characters from the Breath of the Wild timeline.
That moment
that came directly out of Breath of the Wild.
That moment shocked me. Like,
me too. It shocked me.
Again, when I compared this game to Avengers Endgame, there are portions of it, like literally a portal opens and characters from 100 years in the future. Specifically, we had Sidon. You had what's the other Goron's name?
Yunobo. the Agatha of this game.
You had the little Gerudo. I can't remember her name either.
You just said earlier,
Riju. So they're like jumping out of the portal, like flipping Captain America, like.
Yeah, you know what? I'll say, like, in the cutscene right before that, where Zelda's looking up and she sees, I think it was like Divine Beast Vomito, and like it was flickering blue, and then Terako starts playing Zelda's Lullaby or something, and she's like, "Wait a second, you mean it's not too late?" I was like, "Oh no, okay, here it is. Here's where the shoe is about to drop. Here's where they're really gonna start messing with the timeline," and then we get onto, I guess you could go two different routes depending on whether they split the Divine Beasts, the 4 Divine Beasts, into 2 separate sections. So
which was a blast.
I think I went the way that. Yeah, so, I think I went with Urbosa.
Yeah,
and so the thing busts open, and all of a sudden, I'm expecting Link to just suddenly drop in, and it's Riju, and I'm like, what? And I had chills. Like, the moment that I had been dreading of them changing history suddenly became this moment that I felt so exhilarated and so thrilled. I don't even know how emotionally I flip-flopped so hard on that.
It was just fun.
Where I was like, it was so fun.
It was one of those moments where I was like, why are they doing this? And then I'm like, I don't care. It's fun.
And then when Sidon comes with Mipha, I anticipated that because I had already done the other mission. So something about that was so satisfying because we get to see on at least 2 specific occasions Mipha save Sidon. Once in a cutscene from Breath of the Wild where he's trying to get up the waterfall and he can't quite do it, and so she helps her little brother, who is very small at this point, up this waterfall, and it was a teaching moment for him. Then one of the opening chapters, he gets lost and he's trying to face this tiny little boy trying to face a Lionel all by himself, and he's got this commendable courage. If you give into the story, like, it's really powerful, and they have to save him. So for that to be able to come full circle, and him from 100 years in the future, full grown, and you don't really grasp how huge he
in comparison
is
to
until
Mipha,
you see him right next to these other characters. And when he busts through and he saves his sister, like, I felt so emotionally satisfied. And I'm like, everything, and that was where I gave in. Well, I was like, I'm invested now. I accept this because this is the fantasy, right? If something horrible happens, something horrible, unthinkable happens, it's the fantasy to be able to just go back in time and correct those mistakes. And one thing that this game did with the time travel was, when you messaged me, you asked me what I thought about it. I said I had mixed feelings. And the reason I said that was I found it exhilarating and satisfying and so, like, heartwarming to be able to save these heroes who tragically met their end and to be able to affect a better future for them. But yet also, it was at the expense of answering a lot of the questions that I had about what happened 100 years ago.
And I think we got glimpses of what would have happened, especially when it got to the point where the Divine Beasts were corrupted. Because that was endgame at that point. Like, if they wanted to follow Breath of the Wild, I feel like that would have been where the game would have stopped. So Zelda, all hope is lost. She's in Hyrule Field. Link is defending her. She seals him away. It's over. What I really...
But some of the...
what I really liked about what you just discussed, specifically about the characters coming through time, were these characters like you had Teba, who is meeting Ravali for the first time, right? And he has only heard these stories of, like, the mighty Ravali, this legend, and he's experiencing him as he really is, this flawed, arrogant, cocky, like, guy. And there's certain dialogue in the game where he's like, this isn't what I necessarily expected from him.
Yeah, what a great moment.
And you have that, and then you have Sidon with Mipha. And it's completely different, where it's these family members who have been separated since he was a boy, and it's just this emotional callback. and then you have Urbosa and Riju. Riju, right? Yeah, and again, it's not really expecting, like, knowing what to expect from this other person, and Urbosa's treating Riju like she's being a mentor to her. So again, all of these characters, and then finally you have Sidon, who is just like geeking out. Not Sidon. What's his name? Yunobo, who's geeking out at. Why can't I remember any of their names right now? At Daruk. Daruk. Yeah. Sorry, I'm like geeking out and acting like a fanboy. Like all four of them have very different experiences from and expectations of what they expected from these characters who they've only heard legends about. And it was just this fantastical like experience and moment when they finally came together. And especially as they fight together longer, they become a team. Like, again, Avengers-esque. I hate to keep bringing up that comparison, but you have these group of like misfit ragtags through time, and they form this really amazing bond in group, and it was a blast.
And the other thing that didn't really bother me about it as much, like, and this is where I think it has an advantage over Endgame, where Endgame, suddenly they're like, you know, we have this horrible situation. I know how we'll fix it. Time travel out of nowhere. And with Legend of Zelda, time travel is an intrinsic part of this universe.
Yeah.
In Ocarina of Time, in Majora's Mask, it's central to the game. The whole premise of the game revolves around time manipulation. And the acknowledgement of that existed in Breath of the Wild, where they acknowledged the hero of time from the past, from however many centuries or millennia prior. But in Skyward Sword, time travel is central to the story. So we know that this is something that is not out of left field. This is something that's always existed in The Legend of Zelda. And the fact that it finds its way into the Breath of the Wild trilogy, I guess we'll call it at this point, is not that surprising because it's commonplace in this universe. And they did it in a very fulfilling way. But where it does give me more questions relating back to, I'll start with what was not answered that I really was so curious about. And that was, we have an entire DLC episode, the Champions Ballad, that's dedicated to characterizing more of the champions. But also, it introduces a character that we never meet, which is the mentor to Cass. And this is a character from 100 years ago who loved Zelda and saw Link as a competition for her affection. And I thought for sure that character was going to be at least present in this time. And just not at all. Nothing about it. So
it's actually funny you bring that up. I never considered that. And now that you mention it, I remember bits of that. From the narrative of that, but that's interesting. I never once considered that.
Because he's such a key player in the 100 years prior, as Cass would relate it, because he tells all these super important things that Link needs to be able to acquire his own Divine Beast, which didn't play into this at all. So I wonder if maybe it's possible for there to be a DLC that is kind of like the Champions Ballad, where Link gets his Master Cycle 0, and maybe that character, whoever that is, that loves Zelda, this competition for her affection, can some way be implemented into it. If not as a playable character, then kind of like Robbie and Pura, where at least he's involved some way in the plot.
I would imagine that we would see some sort of DLC. The fact that this game's already the number one the best-selling Warriors game in history after less than a week.
That's encouraging.
It's fairly telling. And
Nintendo's been big on DLC lately, and Hyrule Warriors got a lot of really high-quality DLC.
Bare minimum, I'd like to see additional costumes. One of the biggest disappointments, and maybe I missed it, you tell me, I did not see any of the traditional tunics. Like, is it in there? Did I just miss it?
There's one, and it's phenomenal to me. It's super hard to get. Like, the hardest thing I've seen to get so far. Do you want to know about it?
I mean, this is a spoiler cast, so let's go.
All right. Well, I don't have it.
Sure.
But do you know how each territory on the map shows you how satisfied the people are, like how happy they are, and you make them happier by completing certain missions, and each one has a little star, and the star will show you the percentage of happiness. If you make all the places happy, you unlock the green tunic from Hyrule Warriors.
Oh, nice.
With the blue scarf.
That's amazing. I've never seen that.
Spalder. It looks super awesome, and I cannot wait to get it. I think it's so great that the one green tunic, maybe there's other ones, but the one green tunic that is present in this game is the Hyrule Warriors one. Yeah. So it's a nice callback to the other Hyrule Warriors
That's
title.
Kind of amazing. I was completely unaware of that inclusion. I have a feeling I'm not going to have a lot of time to go back and 100% this game until I'm done with this other game I'm playing right now, which is going to take me forever. But I'm already feeling withdraw from playing, because I was so again, near the end of the game, you start to face enemies that are slightly different varieties of enemies that you fought in Breath of the Wild. So you have Lynels, which, like we mentioned before, some are electric Lynels, some are fire Lynels.
Yeah.
One is a Malice Lynel, which is...
I love it.
Amazing
one. I love it.
The Malice enemies are by far the most difficult enemies in the game. They're typically reserved for the final chapter of the game. I didn't find them totally difficult to beat. Once you learn their patterns, I mean, for the most part, it's not that bad. Right. But definitely challenging and really neat to see the variety. Because again, I mean, it would be kind of boring if you just had like the different color Lynels and that was it. But getting those varieties of elementals and the Malice at the end, that was just perfect.
Yeah, I totally love it. Did you notice that there are no gold enemies?
Not yet. I'm waiting for it. Silver was the highest one I saw.
Yeah, silver, and then they have elementals, and then the Malice, but no gold of any creature. So no gold moblins, no gold bokoblins, Lizalfos.
Part of me wonders if that is like an unlockable somewhere that we just haven't seen yet.
Maybe, because I haven't gone completely through the game. I put in a lot of time. I completed the story mode. I missed Monk Master Koshi in Chapter 4, so I'm going to have to go back and... Koshia, rather. So I'm going to have to figure that out. But I love how dense it is. I think that one of the big changes that they made between this and the first Hyrule Warriors is the adventure map aspect and the story aspect were completely separate in the other one. And this one, they're very interconnected. Yep. And they all exist on the same map, and you can kind of switch between them as you like, and they affect each other. And I found that to make the world seem so much more interconnected. And
it totally makes sense why they went that route. So it's not just the map. It's from the pause menu to the settings. Everything about this game is Breath of the Wild to a T.
Yeah.
It's so perfect that even the pause menu had the same sound effects. Everything was in relatively the same order. The map is pretty much the same. I mean, everything about the UI is pretty much spot on. It is, if you've played Breath of the Wild, you can easily jump into this game and know what to expect and know what to do. And with the original Hyrule Warriors, I didn't like the mission select screens at all.
It made it very hard to navigate, I felt like.
So, and this is...
This is hard to navigate too, but it's kind of fun to
explore,
search the map. And they also give you a shorthand. If it's obnoxious to you and you don't want to do it that way, you can use the shoulder tabs to just kind of pick a text version, which if I don't know where I'm at and I want to get to, like, say, the blacksmith, I'll just quickly access the services menu.
I never even do that. I just had to go and find it. See, the more you know.
Yeah, it's just on the top bar. Some of those things you figure out. Like, one of the things that killed me for a good portion of the game, like you mentioned earlier, there are some very narrow passageways. And particularly when there are multiple levels that you're dealing with, I was having a hard time figuring out where Link could fit through looking at my minimap. And I discovered that if you push the left thumb in, you get a zoomed in version. I also
did not know
it
that.
It took me a long... Yeah.
And I was playing handheld mode the whole time. It was tough.
I played on a 70-inch screen the whole time. So that's it's impressive to me that you did that handheld.
I do want to ask you a question about two questions first. Number one, I want to talk to you about the new villain of this game.
Yes,
was the most underwhelming part of the entire game for me, and he's so underwhelming to me that I forgot his name. Aster. So Aster is this right-hand man-ish type character to Calamity Ganon, who's trying to fulfill destiny, preventing time travel from ruining Calamity Ganon's destiny. It doesn't, unless I missed a lot of context, it doesn't explain a whole lot of how he became the right-hand man of Calamity Ganon. He seemed like a religious fanatic.
Yeah. We know nothing about this guy that we didn't know from the single screenshot in the original trailer. Like, people were speculating that he was the fortune teller that was referenced in Breath of the Wild, who kind of foretold of the coming of the Calamity and what set into motion the events that would ultimately lead to him corrupting the Guardians and the Divine Beasts and stuff. He still might be that character. We don't really know. That's a possibility.
He was a means to continue the plot, in my opinion. Like, he was an end to a mean, or a means to an end, excuse me. I was so underwhelmed by everything about him.
I want more. I wanted to understand more where he came from, because there are still so many unanswered questions. He's decked out in Gerudo apparel. So is he a Gerudo? Because if he is,
he doesn't look like it.
According to Legend of Zelda lore, there's only one male born to the Gerudo every 100 years, and he is their de facto leader. Not every 100 years is there a new Ganon, so not every male born to the Gerudo is Ganon. But if he is a male born to the Gerudo, why is he not their leader? What happened? What made him who he is? Like, they call him the Prophet of Doom as his title, and he's referred to as a seer by... I'm drawing a blank on his name. The right hand to Master Koga, Suga. Suga calls him a seer, so we know he's some type of fortune teller. And in this game, he gets a lot of his information from the corrupted Terraco, but we know he existed before he got that information from the future, so he wasn't dependent on corrupted Terraco to get his info. He was already doing that stuff. Presumably, everything that he attempted to do in this game succeeded in the original Breath of the Wild. So it makes me wonder then, what's his story? What's his deal? And as the other aspect of Breath of the Wild 2 that I thought might be impacted by this is, in that timeline, presumably, Aster succeeded. So after that 100 years ended, what became of him? And then I started thinking about, well, he's got the Gerudo jewelry on his head, and he had the long braided hair. All this time we've been presuming that corpse in Breath of the Wild 2 is Ganon. But it made me wonder, what if that corpse is Aster?
I sure hope not.
Like,
that would be a letdown to a certain level, but I still firmly believe his inclusion was a plot device at the very most. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Nintendo was a grand plan for him. He was expendable enough where Calamity Ganon's like, well, I'm done with you.
I'ma eat
Just takes him.
I don't have objection to his existence, and I don't have objection to his fate. Everything that he did throughout the course of the game didn't bother me. I felt like it was okay, but I just never got enough of him. So I'm left unsatisfied. I want to understand more about what's this guy's deal. Why is he so hell-bent on resurrecting Calamity Ganon? I started to get like Aghanim vibes from him, the sorcerer from A Link to the Past early on, but Aghanim was kind of like an alter ego for Ganon himself. So I was thinking, is this a human proxy for Ganon? But then the ultimate conclusion where Ganon kind of devours him and uses his human form to resurrect himself made me think no, because Aster was not particularly a willing participant in that exchange. So it made me think, no, okay, he was not all about that.
I do.
So
go ahead.
I'm just not sure what I'm just left confused and dissatisfied with what I know about him. I wish I knew more, and I think that would make me feel a little bit more, I guess, satisfied by his impact and relevance to the plot.
So I want to just briefly touch on Calamity Ganon. His appearance in this game is very different than his appearance in Breath of the Wild, which is fascinating in its own right. Number one, he is much more humanoid in his appearance here compared to the end of Breath of the Wild, where he has transformed himself into almost ancient tech / whatever was left of his body. His face was more skeletal. It was decaying. 100 years of being, I guess, stuck wherever he was stuck. I feel like took a toll on him, and the Calamity Ganon we see here is like unleashed in his prime, humanoid, very much more like Ganondorf that we would see, except much bigger, full of malice. But interestingly enough, it makes me wonder where Ganon was. He was obviously like in that egg-shaped thing that was in Hyrule Castle. Part of me wonders, like, how did he get a hold of all of this tech that he had? Like the Guardian pieces that he had, the blasters that he had. Like, was he sealed away in another dimension with all of these creatures? And as he got weaker, he was making himself stronger with this technology from the Guardians and from all of this other ancient technology. And again, stuff we just don't see in Hyrule Warriors. But I really did enjoy the final fight with him. But again, nothing like what you would expect. It wasn't that spider-like creature that you fought in Breath of the Wild.
Well, I could be wrong on this, but I think that what we saw in Age of Calamity taught us a little bit about the way that Calamity Ganon functions, and that his appearance in Breath of the Wild is a function of what was available to him to reconstitute himself.
Sure.
The reason why he had more of a humanoid form in this one is because presumably Aster, because he absorbs Aster, who is all human, presumably, and maybe Gerudo. So that being his vessel, the malice corrupting that vessel, he resembles more the form of the vessel that he took. Where in Breath of the Wild, Zelda does this all-consuming shutdown of all the Guardians and all the tech and all that stuff with her when her power awakens. So there's Guardian remnant littered all throughout, not just Hyrule Castle, but the greater Hyrule, all the regions. So
you think he merged
during
with
that 100 years? Yeah, he's kind of like gradually like taking what is available to him that are like the scattered remnant of Guardian bits, and using that to half reform into some semblance of a physical body in Breath of the Wild, which he never quite fully achieved. He only achieved it enough to be able to break out of Zelda's seal.
I mean, it's interesting too, because you could tell the time has not been kind to him, where Calamity Ganon in Breath of the Wild has this crazy mane of hair and this gigantic red beard. Like,
he's robust.
He is very aged, where Calamity Ganon in this game has like the Super Saiyan Goku hair. And that was pretty much it. No beard, nothing else. Again, I see Ganon in this game as like full on, like ready to destroy you, Ganon. And it wasn't just Link versus Ganon this time. You had the entire crew fighting this guy at once.
Yeah, wasn't that awesome? Like, there was something about that. I didn't realize how isolated I felt in Breath of the Wild. And one of the things that I did, this might have just been me, but I played all of Master Quest with Wolflink.
Yeah.
And just having that canine companion with me throughout the whole game gave me a lot of comfort. It was hard to keep him alive, and he helped me stay alive. And in Master Mode, the enemies get their power back if they're not hit for too long. So even just him touching them, even though he wasn't doing any significant damage, was helping me to be able to power through some of the more difficult enemies. But then enemies like Lionel could kill him in one hit. So part of the experience of Breath of the Wild was the companionship between me and my dog. And in this game, it was so satisfying to be able to feel like you're not alone, and to be fighting alongside not just other members of an army, but great legendary heroes. Like Zelda with her fully awakened powers and all 4 champions, and it was really just such an incredible experience.
I had my status bar, my special meter, filled on 3 of the enemies, or 3 of the characters at the final boss. So I had Link's, I had Zelda's, and I had Impa's. And when I got him to a point where I knew that he'd be down if I did all 3, I did it back to back to back, and it was cinematic and it was amazing.
Yeah.
It gave you this feeling of like, you know, the gang is doing this together. And again, that's why I feel like Calamity Ganon in this game as a threat is so much bigger than he was 100 years in the future, weakened, you know, being stuck in this place for 100 years, Link having to take him on solo, compared to this fully functioning beast Ganon. We didn't get to see...
And what you realize is that Link is also significantly weakened in Breath of the Wild. And Zelda is also significantly weakened in Breath of the Wild. Because the Link that you have in Hyrule Warriors, he can fight 5 Lionel at one time. I've done it. And he can win. Like, you can barely fight 1 Lionel at a time. So he's still a shadow of his former self, which makes sense because the whole game is you building him back up from nothing. The one who had the power to seal the darkness, the one who inherited the Master Sword, and now where you start off in Breath of the Wild, he's not even powerful enough to draw it from the pedestal. You really have to grow back up to that point. And in Hyrule Warriors, he starts out pretty strong, and you get him real strong.
I was expecting the ending to be Beast Mode, or Beast Form Ganon, and taking him out with the Divine Beasts. That was the only thing that I'm like, oh, this is totally going to happen. We're going to beat him. He's going to turn into giant pig mode, and that's going to be that.
Would you have liked that, though? Do you want to get into the Divine Beasts?
So I turned off motion controls for Divine Beasts because I couldn't use it. I was beyond frustrated with Divine Beast stages, and it makes me upset because it's the only thing I called correctly in the previous episode. I'm like, we're gonna get control of the Divine Beasts, which was low-hanging fruit. Come on. But I was beyond disappointed with pretty much every aspect of those missions. I wanted them to end as quickly as possible. They were pretty much like press the fire button to win. They give you so much health that I've never come even close to a point where I was concerned about either time or dying.
Oh, I had a real problem with time.
Really?
On a few of them. Yeah. What I'll say, and I'm sure this was not deliberate, so this is not to give them credit, but when each of the champions pilots the Divine Beast in the game, that's the first time that they've ever piloted the Divine Beast.
And they had no idea what they were doing.
A learning curve. And they had no idea what they were doing. I feel like the way that they controlled put me in the shoes of their pilots, where I was struggling to maneuver this massive Leviathan and to try to use it to great effect. It was devastatingly powerful, but also ridiculously difficult to operate. And I was like, this is what they must feel like. And in some way, that enhanced my tolerance for those sequences, because I'm like, this requires a little bit of a learning curve. This requires some getting used to, and it does for my character too. So it's not like a Power Ranger who's supposed to be like bangering with the Zord the second they get into it. This is somebody who's learning how to fly a plane they've never been in.
This is ancient technology that is incredibly slow. So don't expect there to be... I mean, there's a couple of things you can kind of speed through with one of the Divine Beasts. I can't remember which one that goes a little faster.
The Naboris, the camel. I just try to run over everything.
But I found that to be my least favorite segments of the game. Even though the first time I played it, I'm like, yes! Here we go! Because it happens quick.
I'm glad they were there.
It happens quicker than I thought it would happen. I did expect all four to be merged into one at a certain point. Like, I messaged you, and I'm like, where is the Power Ranger Zord, Megazord moment?
Yeah, where's Megazord? Where's Voltron? We want all these.
I mean, I'm happy it didn't come to that. But
it would be cool in the future. Like some unlocked power where they get to be this mega form. Then you fight Ganon in like if Ganon gets super powerful and super huge. Oh no, what do we do? He's way too big for all the Divine Beasts. What if we assemble all the Divine Beasts together? They don't have that power. Yes, they do. Tyrannosaurus. No, that would be an interesting thing. But I've been avoiding the extra missions for the Divine Beast because they were so bothersome. Yep. I'm glad they're in the game. I think the game is better off for having them, but they were definitely the least enjoyable. And shortly before this podcast, I did play Ravali's extra mission, and I'm not sure if it's just that one, but I had a little bit of easier time, and it was because I did completely surrender to the motion control. I just accepted it. I just accepted that I was going to fly him with my right hand. I'm going to fly him with my left hand, and I'm going to just restrict myself to the limitations of the motion control.
Do you have to do a lot of flying with him in there?
Extremely limited. It's exclusive.
Is that the Divine Beast one, or? Okay, I thought you were talking about a different thing with him, but it's okay.
No,
got it.
His Divine Beast only flies, and that made a difference. Where I was like, okay, I was trying to make it control in a way that it can't control, but once I accepted the limitations of the way that it can control, it was more enjoyable. And so I'm curious to see if I can have a similar experience with the other ones. I think Ravali in some ways the worst because you have to use a button to change the perspective. Because if you're trying to hit something on the ground, you need to push the Y button.
I found that out like halfway through my playthrough too of that stage. I'm like, oh, this is much easier.
Yeah. I hate that. I wish, because it's not even a dramatic shift in perspective. It's not like you go from bird's eye to straight ahead. You go from like straight skewing slightly upwards to straight skewing slightly downwards. And there are some characters that just kind of get caught right in that middle area where neither one of those perspectives are perfect for hitting it. And you need to adjust where your plane is, where your Divine Beast is in the space. And that's a little cumbersome, but I guess you imagine these things would be cumbersome to move. So that's not my favorite part of the game. But again, I'm glad it's there.
I'm trying to think of any closing thoughts I can have on this. I did have a prediction that the little robot guy, who I keep forgetting his name, Tarako. I can't pronounce anything right. Tarako. I thought that it would have something more to do with Zelda's mom. To a point where once we're later in the game, you see a very excited Zelda show off Tarako to her mom. She's like, "Mommy, look!" Yeah. And I'm like, "I knew it. There's something mommy related here," and it just never happened. But obviously, we kind of got clues throughout the game that Tarako was going to be something important in Zelda's life. Oddly enough, that she didn't remember it. I mean, this was obviously a traumatic experience where Daddy took away her toy.
Yeah, the weird thing
about that, how do you not remember this kid?
It was like C-3PO, where Darth Vader builds C-3PO, and then he encounters him again, and like somehow forgot that was like some profound thing that he did as a child, and the king confiscates this extremely impressive piece of tech that his 6-year-old built, and then he sees the robot later. He's like, "What the frick is this?" It's like,
or he
king,
and it would be odd for him to like lie about it. Like there was nothing narratively. It would be
so weird for him not to be like, "Hey, how'd that thing get out?"
Exactly.
Like, it's odd that he doesn't do that because it's not like we've ever seen any other thing like it around. It's unique. There's no other Guardian like it. It's the only little itty bitty baby egg one. And there's a reason for that. It's because Zelda made it herself.
When she was like 6.
She sees it, it's like, "Why is it so attached to me? Oh, I remember. I built it when I was a little girl.
He was my best friend.
And then Daddy confiscated him, and he's back." Like that. Link had amnesia in Breath of the Wild for good reason. He was asleep for 100 years. His brain experienced significant trauma, and not everything was knit back together completely. I do strain to accept that Zelda and King Rome completely forgot about this extremely unique, profoundly impactful little robot that she built from scratch, and that he, in a very emotional decision, confiscated from her. Do we know... That's going to make an impression on both.
Do we know how Zelda created the technology to open up space-time portals?
Well, it is a skill that she has had related to music going back as far as Ocarina of Time.
Because did we ever get an explanation of how Terrako opened up that space-time portal?
Absolutely.
Because he just like did a little whistle and there it was, right?
He did a little whistle and it opened up this time.
I mean, that's
portal.
impressive for a 6-year-old to build. And granted, it was maybe a piece of the ancient tech that she put in it, like that little screw they kept showing.
Yeah, I'm perfectly willing to accept that she was meddling in things beyond her understanding. She had a certain rudimentary knowledge of technology, and she was able to fit some pieces together, but didn't understand the true ramifications of what she had built. I totally accept that maybe the robot could do things that she wasn't aware of, because we see that in a lot of ancient tech from the Zelda games, where Link interacts with a lot of objects that he doesn't understand that produce effects that we need to for game purposes, like time shift stones. I don't think Link understands time shift stones. Whoever,
you just
like, whatever makes them work that way, you just hit them. Like Link just hits stuff.
That's all you gotta do.
That's all you gotta do is hit it.
Did you get the secret ending, by the way?
No, because I haven't been able to assemble that robot yet.
I don't want to spoil anything about it, but it's not worth your time.
I'm gonna do it.
You should do it. I was.
Did you?
No, I looked it up on YouTube. I'm like, I'm not gonna do all this stuff, and it's like literally a 15-second scene. So it's
hard. It's hard to do because you have to rebuild the robot, and rebuilding the robot takes a lot of parts, and some of those parts you got to complete a lot of.
How did a 6-year-old get all the parts?
I think she probably just had
them. Guess.
But now they're scattered all over the place. So
it's ridiculous. I just want to close this out by number one. I'm happy that there is somebody out there that I can talk to about this stuff like you. I've been wanting to have this conversation for the last 24 hours when I beat the game. This game exceeded my expectations. There were moments where I was concerned. There was moments where I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't play this game. And the moment you let go of your preconceptions of what the game should be and accept it for what it is, and again, you put it beautifully, where the entire Legends of Zelda timeline is a convoluted time-travel-y mess. And that's what's relatively endearing about it. It's not this easy to follow linear story arc. And if you take this for here's what could have happened and enjoy the ride, you're gonna be better for it. It's Breath of the Wild is like a literary masterpiece. This is a popcorn movie, just an absolutely blast like kind of experience to have. So don't go into it expecting it to be like tying up all these loose ends and expertly crafting this emotional story, killing off all the main characters. You're going to be disappointed. But again, if you accept it for what it is, I hope if you have beaten the game and you are in a position where you're like, I hated it, that you take it for what it is and accept that it's different. And I want to go through this entire game again, and I've never done that with a Warriors game. I have beaten it, and I have been like, okay, that's it. I don't need to do this anymore. But the combat was fun. The story was great. The highs were high and the lows were low. So,
yeah, I echo a lot of that sentiment. One of the things that helped me early on was I played through maybe the first 4 chapters, and it was getting a little long in the tooth. I was getting a little frustrated, and I wasn't really enjoying myself as much as I thought I should be. And I knocked the difficulty down to easy, and that made a big difference, because mostly what makes the game hard is the enemies are damage sponges. So it just takes longer to beat them. And because your characters are very under-leveled at the beginning, it takes really long to beat them. And so even if you get really good at being Dodgy McDodgerton, some of the quests that have time related elements, like you need to do it in a certain amount of time, it's really frustrating. So once I knocked the difficulty down to easy, I started to enjoy myself a lot more, because then I could get through those chapters in like 20 minutes instead of 40 minutes, and that helped. And then the other thing was, like you said, I needed to stop playing it based on what I expected of it and accept it for what it was, and that really allowed me to be able to appreciate what Nintendo and Koei Tecmo had presented, and I feel like they really created something special. The one knock against it that I can say, after having played the whole game, put in about 100 hours, is the performance suffers. The soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks I have ever heard. I love the music from Breath of the Wild, but I would say that it really lacked in terms of the typical Zelda fanfare. Yeah. This game takes the Breath of the Wild music and it gives it that just oomph, that like extra energy that I felt was missing in Breath of the Wild. And so in that way, it took something I love and it really pumped it up to the next level. Not just in combat, but in sound. Expands the experience dramatically by letting you play as all these characters. It lets you really get to know them, seeing impossible interactions between characters that you really could never and should never see, that were heartwarming and satisfying. And I love that about the game. So in another consecutive case of a Zelda demo really bumming me out and killing my excitement over a game, I'm happy to report that while this took me a little bit longer than Breath of the Wild to really fall in love with, I've been sacrificing sleep nonstop since it came out, and I think about it a lot. I want to play it all the time, and I think it's going to be a game that I stick with for quite a while.
Hopefully we get that DLC.
Give it to me!
TJ, thank you for essentially chatting with me about this. I know this was kind of a last minute thing. It's been some time since we've done a podcast, but this was, I think, the best way for us to come back and do this. Where can the good folks at home find you?
You can find my new Lionel-inspired Custom Conquest episode on the Nintendo Wire YouTube channel, so please check that one out. And if you're a Pikmin fan, there's also an Elf one that I've released relatively recently. If you want to keep up with me on Twitter, you can find me at Custom Conquest, or if you want to follow my fitness modeling career, you can do that at Forever Fitness TJ on Instagram.
Nice. And then for me, you can find me over at nintendowire.com. We're still putting out content every day. I am still making YouTube content, not as much as I was with a new baby, but I'm starting to do at least 1 or 2 episodes of the Wiretap a week again. We have a new episode of a Game Boy Color D-Make, which we actually did, Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity. That was... Have you seen that yet? Did you watch it?
I didn't watch it because I was afraid that it might have spoilers in it, but now I'm really excited.
You need to watch it. I'm curious to see what you think about it. Again, Tom Brown is a master when it comes to that pixel art. We have a new...
He's a genius.
We have a new animated series coming out about the history of some video games that Tom is helping with as well. The first episode, I'm not ready to say what it's about yet, but the footage I've seen so far is... I think it's going to do very well. And I think a lot of you are going to enjoy it very much. So look out for that. And then my personal Twitter account is at Amiibo Jason. TJ, anything else to close it out?
Related to being a father, our friend Captain Alex just announced on Twitter that he and his wife are expecting a child. So huge congratulations to him. He's joining the Nintendad ranks. It's going to be an amazing adventure. All your multiplayer games are going to get a lot more fun real soon.
Yeah, so after about the first 6 months of not getting any sleep, then it's fine. Yeah. After that, you're good. I mean, I just beat Age of Calamity with a 2-month-old, so... It's just a lot of late night gaming.
Switch really is the best young parent system because there's a lot of times when you're going to need to be able to bust it out, power it down, quickly get it going again. So it could be your saving grace.
Rock and roll. All right, man. Thanks again. Until next time, stay wired in.
Thanks for playing.